Well, welcome back to the Ropes Family Podcast. This week we're continuing our Fruit of the Spirit series. We're going to be talking about patience. And before we started this podcast earlier, I think I suggested that we just call this an apology podcast because patience is something that I have grown into struggling with. And I'll get into that later. But before we get into that, Courtney, can you define patience for us?
The capacity to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without getting angry or upset. Because I'm so good at patience.
And that's the Webster's one?
Yes.
Okay.
And then in the Bible, patience is the ability to tolerate challenges or delays without becoming upset. It can also refer to persevering towards a goal, enduring trials, or waiting expectantly for a promise to be fulfilled.
I see the biblical interpretation. I see how that works throughout a bunch of Paul's writings, and Paul told us about the fruits of the Spirit, obviously. But there's also a translation difference here. So, in the ESV translation, it says it lists patience as one of the fruits of the Spirit. But in the NIV and yours, it says forbearance. Can you define forbearance? See if they're about the same.
Forbearance is patience, self-control, restraint, and tolerance. In the Bible, forbearance is a godly character trait that means to be patient and to abstain or hold back from retaliation when wronged. It is also known as bearing with one another in love.
I like that, bearing one another in love. The first time I heard the word forbearance was with my student loans. It's because I had to put them on forbearance for something, probably because I was still in school and they let you be on forbearance or whatever. Or I went back to school and they said, you can qualify for that. So that's always the first thing I think about when I see forbearance. Instead of bearing with one another in love, it's we're going to hold your student loan over you for the rest of your life.
That's good. Good stuff.
But we were talking about earlier, patience, this is going to be a kind of hard one for us to talk about.
Yeah, I try not to be on this podcast, but I am not a very patient person. And I struggle because people don't act like I want them to, or they don't act like I think they should be acting. And then that just sends me over the edge.
I wonder why we do that.
I don't know. I think it started with previous generations, honestly.
Blaming our parents already?
My mom's very patient now, like a saint.
Oh, yeah.
No, when I was little, but now.
So I think there's the common denominator here. I see it.
Yep, actually. Rude.
I'm just teasing. So when we were writing this down, I wrote patience is easy when we deal with things that we don't care about.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like it's really easy to be patient about like going to the DMV. Like we don't have to go until we have to go, right? Or when you get jury duty, like we're not waiting anxiously for our letter for jury duty. We are patient. Like we don't care about those things. Like those things, actually, Allison kind of cares about jury duty. She was jealous last time because I got selected for jury duty. She was jealous, but
I want to be selected, but like for a real big murder trial, not like, hey, I have a parking ticket I haven't paid. Okay, anyway, onward.
Moving on. Sorry. It's really easy to be patient with those things, but I think it's way harder to be patient when we care about the things, right? It's real easy to be patient with. It's real hard to be patient with our kids or our spouse or people we love or people we're around all the time. It's really hard to be patient with them sometimes, right? Because I think you said it earlier, because we expect something from them. Like we expect things almost to go our way, or we just kind of expect a certain thing out of it. And when it doesn't go our way, we're going to lose our patience or cool or whatever, It's a tough thing, but moving on with this, we had a catastrophe last night. This kind of goes a little bit with the realm of patience. So in the middle of the night, it's about 2:00. Allison and I were awoken by the great, legendary, dreaded gagging sound.
It's the worst.
All parents, everybody's experienced this before. I don't want to make it on the podcast because I don't want anybody to get sick while you're driving. But, everybody knows that sound, okay? All parents have experienced that. This time was especially bad for me because it was 2 inches from my face. So Elliot likes to wake up in the middle of the night and come into our bed and get 2 inches from me and stay asleep. Okay, and we've gotten used to that. Whatever, it wasn't that bad. He's fine. He comes into our bed, but this time was not a happy time. So I'm awoken by this sound. I sit straight up. Elliot sits straight up. This is all happening in nanoseconds. The next thing I know, I'm standing up, holding him arm's length out like this, and he lets another one go, and it's just all over me, all over my clothes, all over the dirty clothes in the basket, all over my dresser, all over our bed. It's everywhere. It's completely it's a daggum catastrophe. So we get we get everybody, we get him in the shower. Easton, we try to keep him from rolling into it because Easton had gone in there too, and Easton's like discombobulated, doesn't know what's going on. Why are the lights on? Why is everybody yelling, screaming? What's happening? Easton's crying because the little got on him and all this. It's a catastrophe. Emerson, by the way, is very nicely asleep in her bed. She does not leave her room. She's asleep the whole time. Which is a great time because in last week's podcast I said she struggles with this. So it was great that she stayed asleep. So there's that blessing. But so we get them all cleaned up, all this stuff happening. While we were kind of, our bedroom was uninhabitable after this catastrophe because like we had to shampoo the floors. The smell was everywhere. Our bed sheets, our blankets, everything was in washers, dryers. So we just kind of had to makeshift some beds in the living room. Okay, so I'm scrunched over on like a half couch. We have a half couch and a long couch. I'm like on the half couch, and I'm getting to sleep. And I had this thought because what else am I gonna do? I'm gonna think about podcast. So I had this thought. It was really easy to be patient with Elliot. Like I'm not like yelling, screaming at him. Hey, all the things. Like I'm very calm, patient with him. It's okay. You do your thing. We'll be okay. As he's throwing up all over me. You just do your thing. We're going. We're getting there. Let's get it.
Yeah.
It's very easy to be patient with him while he was sick. He couldn't help it. He didn't mean to do any of this. But who Allison and I didn't have patience for was each other. Like I was being a little short, like, we got to get this. And she was being a little dramatic. She was making the sounds because I thought she was just being dramatic, but she says it gets her every time. The sounds. She was the sounds. She's she's doing that. Sorry, if people listening. Like she's being dramatic, or I thought she was.
No, I can't handle it either. She was not being dramatic.
She was going through all this stuff. We just couldn't. I can't figure out why we couldn't be patient with each other. We were going through the same exact situation. That we were reacting the same way. We were doing the things that we needed to do. I couldn't understand why we weren't patient with each other in that moment. It's kind of chaotic, and I kind of feel like I'm airing out our dirty laundry, which literally we are airing out our dirty laundry as we speak.
Been there.
But it's just one of those times. Like it just sometimes it's the stretch of a situation that makes us impatient, or the expectations of people that makes us impatient. But sometimes in that same situation, we can be patient with something else in there. And I have never been. I thought I was good at this, but we'll kind of get into that in a minute. But you have a good verse in here, and I titled this little section that we're about to go into is when patience is not practiced. So what does that look like?
Well, Proverbs 14:17 says, "A quick-tempered person does foolish things, and the one who devises evil schemes is hated." Quick-tempered, that explains me. Not patient.
So I'm going to tell two stories here. The first one, Donovan actually shared a couple of Sundays ago. If you were here, you probably all know it. He was playing in a tennis tournament, and there was a guy on the other team. He was about to play. I think he was either warming up or he was playing another guy, and he hit a ball, and it hit Donovan. Like he was like poking at him. And after that, Donovan's only goal was to hit him back. It wasn't to win the tournament, and it was to try and retaliate and to hit him back, which caused him to lose the match instead of practicing patience and focusing on the goal that he had. You know, he wanted to retaliate instead of win. And I used to be pretty good at keeping my cool and composure. I could be patient and kind to anyone, but as I've kind of grown older, that isn't really the case anymore. And I'm not sure why necessarily. Maybe it's just like the season of life I'm in now, but I kind of find myself being the opposite of patient. And I'm not a huge fan of that. And I don't, and it's not all the time. You know, sometimes it's just, I think it's stress related, you know, the things that go on in our season of life. It's wild.
Well, sometimes I find myself being patient with stuff that I should be freaking out about.
Yeah.
And then little tiny stuff that doesn't matter. I'm like, oh my goodness, you know. Mm-hmm. So I think that is the season of life because, you know, we could break a window and I'd be like, oh, well, that's all right. We'll get it fixed. But, you know, do something little. And I'm like,
yeah, you know, and that kind of goes back to the thought of like in like crazy situations, I can be very calm. Like things that I should be very not calm about.
Yeah.
Like Elliot throwing up on me or because it's not the first time. So I guess I've been practiced at it, but
I would have lost it.
Well, I can stay calm and be patient in the moment situations. It's kind of like the moments right afterward. But Allison would be the first to tell you, like when we first started dating and early in our marriage, that I was a very patient person. It was like nothing could bother me, or you know, nothing was too bad. You know, I was pretty relaxed. I was pretty chill. I tried to. Bless you. I tried to keep that kind of like nothing's too big of a deal for me. I can handle it. But looking back at that time, I wasn't being patient. I was being passive. And that's something that's really kind of crept up a lot in my life. This podcast is just going to be beating me up, me beating myself up, okay? But I was just practicing passivity. I wasn't being, it wasn't that I was being patient. It was just that I didn't care about a lot of things, you know? So of course they weren't going to bother me because I didn't care about them, like we talked about a second ago. And what I've realized is I got a lot of things I care about now. So I can't be I can't be passive. You know, I care about my wife. I care about our kids. I care about the things. So I can't be passive about those things because that's not going to work, obviously, you know, and that doesn't, you know, I told you guys in a staff meeting the other day that I caught myself trying to be patient, but it turns out I was being passive. And I think I shared the story of my kids, like straight up UFC fighting in the backseat on the way home from school one day. And I just kind of turned it off in my brain. I said, that's not happening. I'm like, I'm going to be patient with them. I'm just going to not see it, you know. But that's not being patient. That's being passive. And that didn't solve any of the problem. That just made it worse down the road because it just kept escalating. And what I needed to figure out was a way to patiently referee the UFC fight instead of just ignore it from happening. And you know, it's so tough for me, and I don't know why, and I don't like that personality trait about me. I really like the easygoing personality trait that I have. But when it comes to things I really care about, those are the things that I really struggle with being patient about.
Ben is the most patient human on the planet. Nothing bothers him. He will just go with the flow. Be patient with me. That's hard. And then the kids, he's always patient.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
I was like, I could handle this. No big deal. It'd be easy. But and you know, it's not every time. Not every time. Sometimes I can be patient. I can be like, okay, dude, let me open your 14th applesauce for you. Let me get it for you. Hey man, I know you locked yourself in the bathroom again, but you can do it. You can get out, you know, like I really have tried, you know, but sometimes my patience just kind of wears thin.
Well, one thing that when Billy was a baby, I went into a gentle parenting class because I was going to gentle parent and I was going to rock that. I don't.
Heck yeah.
But I tried. And one thing the teacher said is they'll never remember the milk they spilled. They'll remember how you reacted to the milk they spilled. And so I always try to remember that when I'm dealing with my kids. I'm not saying I'm good at it, but I do think about that when I'm like, oh my gosh, you just spilled, you know, 32 ounces of Big Red in your floor. That happened. I was like, oh, why was that in here?
Yeah.
And my child said, Oops, I didn't mean to. And I was like, I know you didn't mean to, but figure it on the carpet. Okay.
Hey,
All right.
let's just get a whole other one and just keep going on the carpet.
Yeah. And he was like, are you mad at me? No. I'm frustrated, but not mad.
Yeah.
But that was one time, I mean, that was a big deal, and I didn't even explode.
Yeah.
But something small happened, and I'll lose my mind.
Yeah,
so.
it's so strange that we get that way sometimes. Like, yeah, sometimes I can turn it on like a funny filter, and that's how I'm patient with people. I can make it funny, and if I can make it funny, I can make it great.
You deal with junior high boys, you have to.
Yeah. Like Easton and Elliot, when they are doing their dumb stuff, like if I can make it funny, I can be patient. But if I can't make it funny in that moment, then it's just really hard for me to deal with. And I hope I don't get in trouble for this podcast. Please be patient with me as I confess my sins on this podcast. But Courtney, how can we practice patience? You have a verse on here.
Yeah. Psalm 27:14 says, wait for the Lord, be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord. And then my whole thing was, why is it so hard to be patient when we're waiting for the Lord? Mm-hmm. Has he ever shown us that he's not going to be with us? No.
Yeah.
He's always with us. He's always shown us grace and mercy. Mm-hmm. He's going to keep being that same God. But I don't know if we as everyone, but I am so impatient because I'm like, God, I asked. Mm-hmm. I begged you,
Yeah.
And you're not doing it in my timeline.
Yeah. It's when God's not working on the way you want to do it.
Mm-hmm. My timeline.
Yeah, God is somebody you care about, know, and he doesn't do things the way you want him to do them sometimes. So it can be really easy to get impatient with God, and I've done that before. I've thought, okay, this is where we need to be. This is where we need to be going. This is what we need to be doing. But God's like, no. You're going to do this because this will make it better for this. This will make it as you go on and do the next. You've got to do this first before you get there. It's a process. Mm-hmm. And we're kind of talking a little bit about that in youth tonight. We're talking about Romans 8:18. For I consider the sufferings of the present time, I'm going to paraphrase, not comparable to the future glory that we will see. Like it's one of those, we got to be patient in the suffering. Mm-hmm. We got to endure the suffering because the suffering produces steadfastness. Suffering makes us stronger. Consider it pure joy, my brothers. It's related. Continue to wait on the Lord, be strong, wait for the Lord, and take heart. The things that, to be able to be patient is we got to rely on him in those moments where it can cause us to be impatient. So we got to draw on his strength, wait for him to tell us the next move, slow down, all the things like that.
A quote that I didn't get the book name, but when I was studying for this, it was, faithfulness to God translates into patience in everyday difficulties, knowing that God is using tough times to grow our endurance. Mm.
Yeah, it's Romans 5:3. It's the same verse. Suffering produces steadfastness. Mm-hmm. It takes work to follow Jesus, to be faithful. It takes work, and it's not something that just happens overnight. Like, I can't just say, God, please help me be more patient, and not expect to try to be patient the next time. Mm-hmm. God's going to may put us in situations where we may be able to get to practice our patience, and that's an opportunity for us to rely on him instead of just being like ready to be patient. God's going to have us rely on him when he wants us to be patient. And usually it's not when we want to be patient.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then this verse went along with that in the same book, and it was James 5:7-8. Be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains. You too, be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. Mm.
Always be looking for what God's got in store. And sometimes it's hard to see in the moment what is happening. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's hard in the moment to think that you can endure the trial that you're going through and be patient in the time that you're going through. Allison and I have been kind of talking through some situations where, like Allison has like a really strong calling to international missions. And what does that look like for us? Like whose call is more important? Like I'm working here in this church and I feel called to this church, and so does she. But when she feels like sometimes like her call is put to the side because we're not always going on mission trips, right? Or we're not doing things as much as she feels like we need to. But sometimes it takes God saying, hey, this is what you're here for. Do ministry where your feet are, while I prepare a place for you, while I prepare the next trip, while I prepare the hearts for you to go and see, for you to go and share. It's so hard to be patient in those times. Like another example of that is growing up, or not growing up, but between basically my 20s till 28. I ask God all the time, God, please put me in a church. I want to be working at a church. I have this call to do ministry. Why am I not in a church? I think I've shared this story before, but and then God put us here, and as I've grown as a pastor, as a minister, I've realized that if I would have been in one of those churches, or if I would have been in a church as I was younger, I would have fallen apart. I wouldn't have been able to handle it. God was watching out for me in those moments, because he can see. He has a plan, and it's so hard for us to be patient.
Back to my timeline.
Yeah, it's not, God, I got licensed as a minister 2 days out of high school. I'm expecting to work at a church in soon.
Yeah.
But this is my first full-time church gig, and 10 years later after I graduated high school. God, what? But the more you look at it, the more you see God's working in your life, the more patient. And if I would have just remained patient, it would have saved me a lot of heartache.
Right.
But but the thing is God has got it under control, and we just need to be patient and wait on Him. Wait for the Lord. Be strong. Take heart. So the family challenge this week is pretty obvious.
It's a good one.
It's 2 words: practice patience.
And I'm gonna add, find someone you're not normally patient with, and show them some patience this week.
Genuinely. Yeah, don't be like...
No, don't do it obnoxiously.
I am being very patient with you.
Do you see me being patient with you? I actually have said that before to my kids. But
do you see how hard I'm working to be patient with you? Yeah, and if you're passive, try not to be passive. Try to engage patiently with whoever you're trying to just ignore so you can get to the next place. And so I've really tried to do it, and that's I'm stepping on my own toes trying to practice patience. I'm trying to get back to who I thought I could be as a patient person. But that's all we got this week. We will talk at y'all later. Peace.